The following is a conversation. It has the features of any conversation, such as imperfectly expressed thoughts, ill-considered opinions, and the notions of several sleep-deprived brains. Try not to get your stethoscope in a twist about it.
Research has revealed that if we extracted all of the cells in the immune system, we would find that they are about 1.2 kilograms or 2.6 pounds, roughly the size of 6 hamsters.
6 hamsters?
Okay. That's what the article I read. Thank God for non-standard measurement units. Like, how could I have visualized 2.6 pounds? Boy, that's an unfathomable number.
No, they didn't have to translate that.
Not at all. I feel like, I don't know.
I like it though.
So like I said, the authors of the study did not choose that measure. I actually went to the study, the article, and searched for hamsters, and there was 0 mentions of hamsters. So it was just the journalist at sciencealert.com, to whom I say, Claire Watson, thank you.
Yeah.
For taking an obscure, unfathomable measurement of 2.6 pounds and putting it into something that I could relate to.
Wow. You know somebody better make a hamsterconversion.net.
I did find out that there is a website out there that journalists go to use these non-standard measures. So idiots like me have some standard of perspective to understand what these things are. So
that's needed.
So I think my issue with that is that hamsters aren't homogenous, right? So you're introducing a significant amount of error.
Yeah.
Right?
Doesn't matter though. Doesn't matter because
you at least at the very least
when you're talking
qualify your hamster type.
Yeah. When you're talking to the general population, they're not thinking but how much does that hamster weigh? They're just like, okay, now I have a general idea. So I get it. But also,
it's also just fun. You just think about I don't know what the number was, 6 hamsters. That's a lot of immune cells worth of hamsters running around in your body. That's
one pineapple also was the other one.
No
cited.
way that one pineapple is the same weight as 6 hamsters.
I mean,
they're not what size hamster.
These are not.
Now, if your hamster size is 1/6 that of a pineapple, it's easy.
Would you say that 6 hamsters equals 2 burritos?
Well, what's in the burrito?
So you guys are too.
I don't know. Are hamsters that heterogeneous? I feel like when I see a chipmunk, they're all the same.
You know, they also have a Terry Crews sized hamster.
Yeah, a myostatin deficient hamster.
Ooh.
Oh boy.
Ooh. Sheesh.
Swole.
Meandering in the margins of medicine, it's the Shortcoat Podcast.
Weird news,
fresh views,
helpful clues, and interviews.
By students, for students.
Subscribe to our weekly show at theshortcoat.com.
Welcome back to the Shortcoat Podcast, the show that gives you an inside look at medical school from the students drinking from that fire hose, a production of the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine. I'm Dave Etler. With me today in the SCP studio, a group of decidedly non-standard people. For instance, to give you some perspective on her physical presence, she's about the same mass as 38 hamsters. It's M2 Hend Al-Kaylani.
We should actually try that out.
I took a guess.
I just want to say you said she was about 30 pounds there.
I did. He's about 1 human being tall. It's M2 Eric Vallin.
Hello.
He occupies about the same volume as 68 trillion human cells and bacteria. It's M4 Alex Belzer.
Howdy.
Welcome to the show. Alex, you've been interviewing for residency programs.
Yeah.
Did we try to teach you anything about what those interviewers might be looking for and how you can show them that you have what you're looking for? Did we do any of that for you?
By we, do you mean
the
you?
College of Medicine.
The College, yeah, they sent me some emails.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
What do you remember what was in those emails? Did they talk about what qualities you should be projecting?
They sent a lot of links to those garbage AAMC articles.
Did you?
You know what I'm talking about? The ones that are the 3 things that your residency interviews are looking for. And it's passion. You're looking for passion. And you being confident but not overconfident. And also expressing interest. So it's incredibly vague things.
It's the same thing as passion too.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
Like,
that's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah. So yes, but no.
Okay.
I'm gonna say.
I will say I did like the article that you sent us though.
Well, I was going to talk about that article. MedPageToday.com posted an article from a assistant professor of anesthesia and critical care and a medical student at the University of Chicago on the 4 traits of all-star residents. And I thought those 4 traits would be kind of fun to bat around as like, you know, we can sort of debate them or add to them as we might. So the traits are selflessness, optimism, personal responsibility and ownership, and personal meaning. So we'll define each of those. Selflessness is residents. They want residents that demonstrate selflessness by putting personal wants aside to help others, which requires emotional intelligence and perspective taking. It's not a formally taught thing, but it can be learned and honed, they say. Optimism is a choice that you make, especially in the face of inherent difficulties of medical practice. A growth mindset facilitates optimism and viewing challenges as opportunities for improvement. Personal responsibility and ownership, taking ownership of all patient results, good or bad, to build intrinsic value in one's work. This is a sign of maturity and humility, acknowledging one's role in outcomes rather than defaulting to blame. And personal meaning, reflecting on the deeper reasons for practicing medicine, which the authors think can help sustain doctors through tough times, providing motivation and resilience. Mm-hmm. The only one, I mean, I personally, that all that sounds good. The only one I would, you know, personally caution is the selflessness one. I think having some sense of what you need as a human being in this world is kind of important. But I get what they're saying. You know, they're not saying absolute selflessness there. In fact, I think there was a caveat in that article. Like
there was.
Yeah.
I like the perspective taking though. I thought that was cool. Like seeing other people's scenarios and being able to recognize if other people are, you know, in need.
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously like super important.
Yeah.
When you're trying to help people is, you know, what do they need help with on a super basic level?
Yeah, I would just think that, you know, residency is probably extremely trying, and it does take more out of you to, you know, take into consideration other people's perspectives when your perspective is exhausted and, you know, sleep deprived and stressed out, etc.
Yeah, but a little extra something, little extra emphasis on being able to take those perspectives that aren't yours.
Yeah.
I also think that being selfless, or like, bless you.
Thanks.
Or being able to
start again, because the sneeze blew what you were saying right out.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, no, you're fine. Let's try to remember what the hell I was saying. I think no, it's okay. I think okay. Being selfless in the way that they described in the article of like, taking, like, looking at someone else's perspective, like trying to step in your colleague's shoes and be like, okay, like my colleague looks like really stressed right now. I wonder if there's a way that I can help out. I feel like the only way that would be healthy in like a 3-year or 4-year long program where you're also exhausted is if your co-residents are also selfless and are able to pick up for you. And that's out of your control. So like you can't really control everyone else's personality. So like,
well, I would hope that your residency program, if this is what they really value, your residency program would have been building these teams over time to the point where once you got involved, you could be reasonably assured that most of your other colleagues are similarly minded.
Agreed.
Yeah. This is one of those cultural development things.
Yeah.
It's something that they like, not Carver specifically, but if you like look online and people are like passing down knowledge about what to look for when you're interviewing for residency, one of the big things is like, is the culture positive? Is the culture toxic? How would you fit into that culture? Do the residents support each other? Do the program directors and associate program directors support you? Do the third-year residents look like they're dead?
How dead?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
How dead are you inside?
So yeah, I agree. I think it's really I don't know, relatively easy to like put on a face in an interview and say that you're going to do this. But honestly, I think it comes more from the culture of the program.
Yeah, you may very well want
themselves. Yeah. Like I got good vibes from Carver. That's why I came here. It was good vibes.
Yeah.
You might very well want those things, want to be those things. But, you know, when you get there and you realize nobody else is doing those things.
Got to save yourself at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the optimism thing. I feel like personally I'm a bit of a pessimist. You know, like I've been feeling super competent at work lately.
Hell yeah, dude.
That shit's gonna end any minute. That's what that's what I end up thinking sometimes. Like at some point I'm gonna make some mistake that will just put all of that into question for me.
That's just an unhealthy thinking pattern.
I'm aware of that. But optimism is as a choice. I guess I'm not making the right choice. Sometimes I am, but you know, whatever.
Is it a choice, Dave?
I don't know.
Or
a growth mindset. Yeah, like wouldn't it be okay, so when you make a mistake, you know, for you guys when you do poorly on a test, or I don't know, when you f up your research, or when you know, Alex, when you say something during rounds that you wish you could take it back, do you really look at those as like, oh, this is an opportunity for improvement?
Yeah, I do.
Do you?
Yeah, it took like a lot of like doom spiraling in the first couple months of core year, but
okay.
I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about failure recently.
Yeah.
And there's like a continuum of failures, right? There's like I said something stupid in rounds. And then there's like I failed a test. And then there's like I did a bad professionalism violation and got kicked out of school. So there's like all these continuums of failures. And I feel like the biggest thing that I picked up in clinical clerkships was raising my threshold for considering a failure a failure.
Okay.
And below that threshold, I see it as a work in progress.
Learning.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
and there's opportunities every day to learn.
Your perspective changed over time.
Absolutely.
As to what was a failure and what was just...
And maybe that's this growth mindset you speak of.
I would.
And this relentless optimism.
What?
I hope it's not relentless. People who are relentlessly optimistic, I just want to punch in the throat, but...
That's fair.
What do you have any like specific moments that you remember in core year that kind of helped you shift towards a growth mindset? Or like change your perspective?
Yeah, so I was on the transplant rotation, the transplant surgery rotation, and the transplant fellow, she was, I forget what her name is, but she was like 5 feet flat tall. And she was like a board certified transplant surgeon in India before restarting residency in the United States.
Oh man.
It's one of those where she's like exceedingly overqualified to be here, but she's got to go through this process again. And so she was a fellow. And she asked me what one of the anti-rejection meds, like what the mechanism was and how that affected like their T cells or whatever. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I have no, I literally never thought about this before. And she was like, every time you come into that situation, you just need to look it up and learn from it. And she was like, go look it up, report back to me in 10 minutes. And so I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm growing. I'm in the mindset of growth right now. So that one stands out to me.
Yeah, you could have been like, oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'll never recover from that embarrassment. But I don't think that's, my guess is probably if you've lasted long enough in med school, you've got that probably down by the time you get to the stage. You were ready for that. You were ready for that knowledge. You were never going to be like, you were never going to resist that knowledge.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I can see where like the environment you're in plays a huge role. If that doctor was just like, why don't you know this? Like that.
Yeah.
Well, I've definitely had situations like that before where they were like, you should know this.
Yeah.
Oh, I actually, on my emergency medicine rotation, they asked, I was getting pimped, like, it was like midnight. And I was getting pimped on like anti-platelet medication activities. I was like, I'll be honest, I don't know any of this. And she was like, you're a third year med student. You should know this. And I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. She was like, look it up. And I was like, I'm going to be honest, I don't want to look it up. So like, I don't know. Maybe it was midnight and I was just tired and
you're at the end of your rope.
Yeah. So yeah, the environment really matters.
Yeah.
And that comes back to this like culture of the program thing, right? Like I think different specialties are better at this than others. Different areas of the country are better than this than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's important.
And there's going to be a lot of failures too. That reminds me of like, I'm glad that, you know, selfishly in that moment, you didn't know those antiplatelets because we just learned those and I know them now, but I'm going to forget them in a couple months again.
Yeah.
And everything is just difficult and there's so much information that you're constantly going to forget it. And
I think this is why we don't turn you into doctors right after Keystone is over because
a billion percent.
There's
oh
like,
my God.
it's so bad.
You have to have time to come back to these things and
apply them 1,000,000 times before you fully understand.
Yeah.
Well, and the truth is like 6 months after that on my internal medicine rotation, I ended up pimping one of the critical care attendings about antiplatelet medications because I had like gone home and I looked up like the Keystone like trials that had happened with these antiplatelet medications and looked up all their mechanisms and pharmacodynamics.
Hang on, you can pimp your attendings?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a kind of a stretch situation.
Yeah.
I mean, he had pimped me first and then it like completed and then he was talking and then he like made a mistake and I was like, wait.
As you should, bro.
Yeah.
I love that.
So yeah, I mean, you stick with it. You see these things 5 times and then you're like, I get it now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a final moment
process.
when it is kind of locked into your
no final
cortex.
moment,
Okay. Got to keep going back.
Yep.
Yeah. I've heard surgeons like will review the anatomy before a surgery they've done, you know, even in private practice and later on.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Personal responsibility and ownership. So this one's, I mean, it sounds reasonable, taking ownership of all patient results, good or bad. And yeah, sometimes
really
these
like
things
that
are
one.
out of your control a little bit.
But there are always things that you can do to have made the situation probably a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I feel like I've learned this through like team sports, and I actually just made a mistake. We had a real patient interview this week. I don't know if you had yours.
No.
We had our PBCR where we go into the hospital and we interview a real patient. And there were a lot of things that were outside of my control. And at first I attributed me getting a bad history to those things. And the person that I was with, who I was taking the history with, immediately like self-reflected and been like, oh, well, we could have done the ROS this way. And I was like, wait, you're right. That would have actually made it so much better. And so I kind of learned from him. And then reading this article, I was like, wow, I could have taken more responsibility and I would have learned a lot more from that.
But also what's interesting about that story is that your colleague, classmate?
Yeah, classmate.
Your classmate was basically not only doing this for themselves, but also giving you that opportunity to figure it out too. Like basically telling you like, oh, this is what I just thought of, you know, maybe we should. That's super cool.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's at least with our class, like we try to share as much knowledge as we can with each other.
Yeah.
Which is good. Yeah.
And you know, you're going to keep doing that in residency, right? Like, I think you're going to keep doing that throughout your career. I mean, that's why you guys write articles. That's why you guys have conferences. That's why, you know, and you're going to be, you know, teaching each other as long as you're doing this job.
Which is an amazing part. Like we had our ECEs the other day and just rounding with the team and just being in like the room before rounds and the whole team environment and just like, I don't know how collegial people were and the teamwork was so cool. I was like, this is the right spot.
Damn, this guy's going to switch to internal medicine.
No, it was actually a surgery rounds.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm glad yours went like that. Mine was like not like that. it was so weird. I was like, I don't want to do this for a year. It was very linear in that every trainee just talked to the attending and that was it. It was like transactional between each one. And then at the end, I was like following the med student who I was shadowing, and at the end, like the senior like members of the team just walked off, and like they didn't say anything. They just walked off, and I turned to the med student, I'm like, okay, and he was like, oh yeah, they're like going to a conference or something. We don't need to be here anymore.
That happened to mine too.
Really?
Yeah, the attendings completely just walked off, and then we went a different way without saying anything.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
Guess that's normal.
They're busy.
Yeah, it's not uncommon, I don't think.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. They're just like, all right, we're done. Bye.
Yeah, at least
see you
I
tomorrow.
post
See you tomorrow.
that.
Yeah.
I guess
call me if anybody's dying.
Yeah.
I guess that's efficient. Why waste time on pleasantries? Like,
Exactly.
thank you very much for coming. I appreciate all of your hard work today.
Yeah.
Boy, I think we learned a few things today, and I really love you guys.
Oh, I want to round with Dave.
I also think one of the things
that
I also think that one of the things that goes along with personal responsibility and ownership is, and you've already sort of touched on this a little bit, is self-reflection, is being able to I think, oriented towards looking back at yourself and going, okay, am I doing this right? And constantly sort of doing that. I don't think it's a good idea to do that in a super negative way, obviously, but you have to be self-evaluative. The most annoying people to work with are people who don't understand how they have contributed to anything. I mean, that's just super annoying.
Yeah, you can't learn.
That person will never learn anything, I think.
Even if they're good at what they do.
It's the worst.
I think a big part of that would be, finding a healthy way to separate your actions from your worth and your identity. And and I feel like that's probably really difficult in a healthcare setting where like people's health rests in your decisions. But to be like, okay, like I did this one thing wrong, or I could have done it better. That doesn't make me a terrible person or a stupid person. It's just something that I can improve on.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why a lot of residents and attending physicians and medical students get burnt out is because they see the consequences of their actions or the possible consequences of their terrible proposed actions. And then they take it very personally. They're not able to separate that from their self-worth. And then it ends up in a downward spiral.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
I think that's a very common thing. And that's why successful residents have this sort of, growth mindset that they're taking responsibility for the things they should be taking responsibility for, but also being able to be self-aware about their mistakes and move on from them.
Yeah. I think another kind of aspect, another side of the coin is like how much you bury yourself into it. I think it's a job where you can fully dedicate your life to, but in my opinion, it's good to have things outside of that. And so, you're not constantly perseverating and, keep bringing work home to you. I think that's another really important part. At least it will be for me.
Shortcoats, if this episode is worth listening to this far, it's worth sharing. So blast us on your socials. And if you want a sticker for your trouble, send us a screenshot. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you guys what you thought about that while reading this article. There was like a part in it that said...
Part of your identity?
Yeah, medicine is not a 9-to-5 job. This is who you are. What did you guys think about that?
And I have,
that's interesting.
We've had conversations in the past on this show about, is it possible to do medicine and not have it be like your calling? I think,
I think so too.
It totally is.
It's a job, right?
Yeah.
And it's an awesome and badass job. But at the end of the day, if you wanted to do Botox and, lip fillers or whatever you wanted to do and just do a 9-to-5, I think that's chill.
Are you implying that lip fillers and Botox are not an essential part of humanity?
No, trust me, they are.
Okay.
They are now.
I mean, I will say that I think the most successful doctors that I've seen, and usually the happiest doctors I've seen too, have medicine as their calling and their thing that they do, but at the same time, they have a life outside of medicine too. It's just that these aren't perfectly compartmentalized. I think that the best situations that I've seen are when people, I guess doctors, have medicine as a part of who they are and part of their identity, but it's not their whole identity. They have friends outside of medicine. They do exercise outside of medicine. They have carefree time. Yeah, hobbies.
Yeah. I like that take.
Yeah. Because then I think that a lot of medicine, at least on the clinical side, is being able to connect with people on a human level and be genuine about it. And I think it's hard to do that if you don't identify as a doctor.
Yeah, the people aspect. And obviously that's really important in care. Health is very important to everybody, and I would agree.
So we're sort of edging into the personal meaning quality that was identified in this article. Reflecting on deeper reasons for practicing medicine can help sustain you through tough times. I mean, I guess they're saying it's not enough to just want to help people, but a deeper meaning than that? I'm not really sure where that goes.
I
guess, like causes, having causes that you believe in that relate to your practice of medicine. I'm not really sure
maybe true passion.
But I'm still not quite sure what that means.
I mean, I kind of want to abstract like the really cool parts of medicine in this instance, right? Like there's the thing, shit happens in the body and it's crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's the, oh my gosh, I just connected with a stranger and like helped them solve something, even though we had no relationship before this. I think there's the, oh my gosh, I'm helping like a population grow and be better. And there's also just the amalgam of weird things and weird situations that you can find yourself in a clinical setting where you have totally different perspectives on the way people live their lives. And I think that people find different meaning in whatever different situation they're in medicine. I mean, no doctor has the same job as another doctor, really. But it I don't know, it's almost hard to explain, hard to put into words. But there is like a meaning that you can find in what you do, regardless of what you're doing. And part of that is the mindset that you take into it. But
I have personally found that I have more meaning in doing this job because of this show and because it enabled me to get a greater connection, a broader connection to what you guys were doing and why I was here. And maybe that's a similar idea. Like, it's not just, being on the internet and telling people about this. It's also the connection, the really deep part of it, I think for me, is connecting back with you guys and really understanding why I'm here and what I'm doing. And maybe that's similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's unique, it sounds like, in every case.
Yeah. And like I said, I think different doctors find different meaning in the things that they do.
Right.
Whether it be closing somebody's face up after doing their throat surgery or whatever, just saying hi to a patient and having them smile when they look back at you. There's a lot of little things, there's a lot of big things, and I think being able to figure out what means a lot to you is really important in making a successful practice and being a good resident and doctor.
Absolutely.
Not to be
do it.
It just sounds like any other job you could have, though. Like, in the sense that you can find things that bring joy to you in that job. Like, I don't know, let's say you just really love banking, or like you helped someone set up their mortgage or something. Like, you can find...
you help them get the American dream,
Yeah.
I have banker friends. I don't know how passionate they are about banking.
Really?
Yeah, I know some bankers too.
I mean...
It's got to be some passionate banker out
there. Does it have to be banking?
Bad example.
Yeah, that was kind of a terrible example.
I don't know anything.
I am so excited to get you this APY today.
Yeah.
I feel like it sounds like it's not being a doctor itself. It's the connections you get with patients, or the ways that you help them, or like reaching out to students. Like it sounds like more of part of your, like, for example, Dave, in your case, it's part of your personality that you want to connect with the students and learn from them. Like if your personality could have just as easily been like, okay, I'm here to do my stuff and get out.
And surely we all work with people like that. Like, and I guess that's fine. Like, I'm not going to judge them for that. It's just what I get out of it is,
yes,
I want it to be more than that.
It's great and it's healthy, and like applying that to residents, like I feel like ideally every resident would find that joy in it. But if they don't, and they are here for 9 to 5, but as long as they're doing their job safely and putting patients first and like being ethical, like I feel like you can do that too.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to get at.
No, and I wholeheartedly agree with you that this isn't something that's unique to medicine.
Yeah.
I think it's unique to a successful life.
So I guess
what field you're in.
Purpose.
Yes. purpose.
Enjoyment.
So I guess one of the questions I have is, how do you, okay, great. We've decided that these are wonderful. And by the way, notice one thing that's not on this editorial's list of important traits is
grit, honesty,
working hard, dig deep.
Okay, yes, there was that.
Perseverance.
But also just like
intelligence,
science, medical knowledge. Like, I think it's probably tempting when you go into thinking about your residency interviews is like proving that you have the knowledge necessary to do this job.
That's probably
absolutely
the opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah.
Nobody ever asks you about, I mean, I'm not going to say nobody, but pretty much every interview I've had has been a conversation about like non-standardized things. Mm-hmm. It's been all like, oh, I see you're a musician and I see you like running, and like, why did you like this research project? There's like no medical knowledge, at least in my interviews for internal medicine.
I think that's probably pretty common. Yeah. I mean, they're aware of your board scores. They're aware of your grades. They're aware that your medical school is accredited, which means that you cover a certain number of topics and you're supposed to, your medical school does its work to determine that you are competent in those things. Mm-hmm. So they can pretty much take those things off the table and maybe have a more interesting conversation with you.
Yeah. You're working with them for 4 to 5 years. So 3 to 5 years, they got to make sure that they want to spend time with you.
Yeah.
It's easier to teach a really cool person how to do medicine than to make a really medically intelligent person a cool person.
Yeah.
So how do you...
That's deep.
How do you get these concepts of selflessness, optimism, personal responsibility, ownership, and personal meaning across during these interviews when they're talking to you about running or...
I think being yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like medical school interviews. It's be yourself, and I think that likes attract in that sense, and what's meant to be will be.
Yeah, I think there's the biggest thing personally for me that allowed me to, what I think was show these things in my residency interviews, was like finding some comfort, being comfortable, opening up to these people, not being afraid to smile, look them in the face, use my hands to talk. Mm-hmm. Being a person. Yeah.
I would maybe also your evals.
Explain.
Like, isn't that part of your application? Like your
it is, but
not really.
It is. We write an MSPE. You've seen your MSPE, Alex.
Yep.
A lot of the comments in there are very positive. I'm certain, and I'm certain of this because they almost all are. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's very rare for an evaluation to be like, this person sucks, do not hire.
Yeah. And actually, like
they slip through the cracks.
But if they got to that point, we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
The other side of that is that if everybody's are pretty much all good and all of these subjective things are like, oh my gosh, this is one of the best students I've worked with. Pretty much everybody has a comment like that in their MSPE. And so it really doesn't mean much of anything at all.
Yeah.
It's just like a red flag if you don't have these things.
I would say from the ones that I see as I write these MSPEs, there are some kind of meh observations, some mid in the vernacular of the young people.
Heck yeah.
Some
Dave.
mid comments, that you're like, okay, these are bare minimum. Like, okay, this is cool. And then there are the extra comments that you're like, okay, I understand this person is doing a little bit more than this. But you're right. Like, most of the time, they're pretty standard.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So one of my friends just talked to I don't even know what you call it, but he talked to the head of the department at ENT for like admissions.
Like the PD, program director?
No, it wasn't PD, it was Scott. The facial plastics ENT otolaryngologist guy. I think he's new, but he talked with him and just talked about all the things that really matter for residencies. And apparently away rotations are extremely important.
In some specialties.
In some specialties, yeah. So I guess at least for ENT, like doing a sub internship and spending time there is extremely important. Mm-hmm. And then he said, like, obviously your letters and research are super important, But I think it's more the less of like, who are your letters from rather than what they say.
I hope that's not true.
It's a terribly difficult thing to actually make an assertion about because it matters more between different people and in different specialties. And maybe that matters more in ENT. I don't know.
Yeah. Some specialties are very small and maybe this is an example of, relatively speaking, there's not that many ENT plastics people versus family medicine.
But the ENT program is great here. So if you get a letter from an ENT guy here, it's like ENT guy or girl. It's like
very well.
It's like I trust these people.
Yeah. But in IM, they told us explicitly before we even asked for letters, they were like, pick somebody that you've worked closely with who can speak really well about you and make it personal. And they told us specifically, like, don't ask somebody for a letter because of their name.
Sure.
Because a mid letter from a great person is so much better than a fantastic letter from, I don't know, somebody who knows you well.
Yeah.
The opposite.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I would agree.
I would say that one of the ways that you can be strategic about exhibiting these values or these qualities is in the questions that you ask during your interviews. There's always that, so do you have any questions for me? What was your experience with that?
Yeah, no, that's a significant part of interviews. It's on the one hand, it's a litmus test for how thoughtful are you. It's how much interest have you actually shown in this program? Like, how much do you know about our program? And it's also an opportunity for you to actually ask a question about something you're curious about. And I think kind of at its very deep core, it's a conversation starter. It's a way that you can go outside and break out of the structured interview session to show how well you are interpersonally. And I hate that it actually has to be that when it's just you asking questions, but so the way I kind of thought about it was, how can I connect with the interviewer? How can I don't know, riz them up is what I was literally saying.
How do you pull on the heartstrings?
Yeah. And so what I would do is I would look up the interviewer before the interview. I would find out where they're from, and then I would I hope they're not listening to this right now about my formulaic approach to this, but I would ask them about their background, ask them how their transition was to the place. I would always ask culture questions because I feel like those are so much more important than asking how's your call schedule like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And so I don't know, it's trying to get to know them as a person, right? Because that's what you really care about.
When you're asking about culture, you're asking about some of these things, right? You're asking, can I expect to feel the support of my colleagues?
Yeah. Precisely.
How, when a resident makes a mistake, how is that dealt with?
How would you ask that?
Well, what do you mean?
You pretty much ask that straight up.
Yeah. I mean,
I think that's appropriate.
I would hope.
That was actually a pretty common question asked in the resident socials is they'd be like, how do attendings respond to you as a learner? Yeah,
super
absolutely.
Important question.
Yeah,
they ask that just straight up explicitly.
Okay. It's a good point that I think you're making, which is that some of these questions you would choose where to ask them.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So context matters.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that, but it makes a lot of sense that you might not ask that particular question during the interview portion, but you might ask it of, the other people.
Yeah.
And I would assume that there is some feedback from these more social activities.
What do you mean
to the interview, to the actual formal interview part of the process? Otherwise, why would they? I guess it's to give you some idea of the culture. Yes.
There is a disclosure made at almost all of these resident socials that is, this does not affect your ranking at all.
Oh, really?
They're always we were not paid by the residency program. They bought us food and told us to get on this video call, but this question session does not affect your ranking.
Okay.
So it's really you to get a good litmus test of the program.
Okay. All right.
Now, when you're in an interview and they're like, do you have any questions for me? When the program director says that to you, I mean, you better have some things lined up in your back pocket.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
We're done here.
See ya.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, I got something else to do. Well, okay, so I think maybe you could ask that question like literally during your interview session then, if that's And my feeling is that if they were like, "Oh, this is off-putting," then you probably don't want to work there anyway.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And I guess it shows maturity, right? To be like, "Hey, this is going to happen to me. I am going to make a mistake. How are you gonna work with me with it?"
Yeah. And all the program directors that I talk to emphasize that you should be asking difficult questions to the program directors. If you have a legitimate concern about how you're going to survive there as a resident, like you should ask that. Now, you should be tactful about it, no doubt. Yeah. But I think it's perfectly acceptable to ask the residency program director, how do you help residents that are struggling? Okay. I think that's a pretty common question that people ask. But it's important, right? Because residency is not going to be a fully successful growth mindset process. Yeah. You're going to have some setbacks and you're going to have to ask the program director for help at some point. And getting a sense for how they're going to approach that situation is very important in figuring out where you want to go.
I'm glad we have an M4 here.
Yeah.
You have a lot of insight.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, you have a lot more experience than we do.
This would have been a tough conversation with just 2 M2s and Dave.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Well, you made it to the second break. You tolerate us. If you can, consider donating or buying a sticker or something. Visit theshortcoat.com and help us do stuff without having to beg a dean for money. Thanks.
Another reason these traits are important, especially if you're an emergency medicine doc, is because there are real reasons that your job might be super difficult. It might at times suck. And I'm not talking about paperwork, not talking about the actual medicine or even annoying coworkers. I wanted to show you a recent video from the New York Times that, I just want to show you this video. Hang on.
Where do we look?
Oh, there. This is fancy.
And then she came across the room and cupped my head and punched me 5 or 6 times. And she kneed me in the face and knocked me out. And when I came to, my coworker was dragging me across the floor of the ED away from her because she was trying to do it again.
I got into emergency medicine because I wanted to care for people, but I didn't go into emergency medicine to watch my colleagues get stabbed by a patient with kitchen shears.
Violence has become a daily occurrence in our hospitals. I was knocked unconscious by a patient.
Patients have tried to stab me. Patients have spit on me.
Clawed, bitten.
I took punches to the face.
Hit me in the left side of my face.
One of my nursing colleagues was beaten about the face with a plastic lunch tray.
Punched, kicked, spit on.
All of this is piling emotional, physical, and psychological trauma on people who are already under intense strain. I've personally suffered PTSD from an attack, and it's pushing our EDs to a breaking point.
Violence in our department doesn't just affect our staff.
It's pretty hard to provide quality patient care when you're stitching up your colleague's face.
I could tell patients one thing to remember when interacting with healthcare providers. It's that we are people and we are here to help.
We're humans too.
I am here to care for you, not to be your punching bag.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I think we can all get behind that message of ending healthcare violence. I don't know. What are your initial reactions to that? I mean, I know it's kind of a heavy thing to drop on you.
My knee-jerk reaction is like, oh man, people are now beating up healthcare workers for helping them out. Like, where are we as a society? We're going down the tubes. Let's move to Mexico.
What surprised me was when it said that violence has been rising. I don't know. When I was watching it, I just assumed like, okay, this has been happening forever, and now someone's saying this needs to stop. But that's interesting that it's rising.
Mm-hmm. Well,
why?
Yeah, I mean, especially in the context of violence overall in society has been precipitously declining over the last 300 years.
Exactly.
There is no reason that comes to my mind immediately that's like at the root cause of this.
Dare I say mental illness and COVID and, drug abuse and lockdowns?
I think there's been a lot of, I think it would be a mistake to ignore the stressors of modern life.
Things have been stressful in the past 5 years.
Which have been changing, right? And, COVID was certainly one of those areas where, people suddenly started expressing their skepticism about the knowledge that doctors were trying to drop on their patients.
That's true.
There does seem to be.
I don't know why
respect.
that leads. I don't know why it leads specifically to violence, but I guess it could increase the chances of that happening.
Yeah. It also says it's been rising over the last decade. So this isn't isolated to COVID either.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
That is a good point.
It feels like they're alluding to a dehumanization that's happening. I'm a human who's trying to help you. Why are you hitting me? Why? Why don't patients see providers as human?
I found myself thinking about what happens when you try to rescue a hurt animal, which is that they fight back because perhaps in the extremity of their pain or whatever, they're irrational. So maybe that's part of it.
I have kind of a philosophical point. I feel like, and I may be completely wrong. I don't know a whole lot about medicine. I'm a second-year medical student. All I do is bury my head in books all day, so take it with a grain of salt. But when I talk with people who, aren't involved in the profession, my family's in the profession, and when I'm at like social gatherings or I've listened into other conversations about, people that are talking about their doctor visits and are talking about something they got diagnosed with, etc. It just seems like there's not a whole lot of humanization that's going on with the doctor. Like, oh, they made a mistake. Oh, they, got my echo backwards. I want to sue that guy. Or, they said that I should stop doing this activity. And it just seems like, I don't know. There's almost a distrust. There seems to be.
Oh, for sure. There's
in a healthcare system that seeks to profit off of caring for people rather than seeks to care for people in the best way possible. I suppose that's sort of an inevitable conclusion that we come to.
Sure.
I mean, they've actually, I can't remember exactly what the data was, like the exact details of it, but they've studied this, and the conclusion is that the people who are more likely to get sued, it's not because they're practicing worse medicine, it's because they have less of a connection with their doctors,
less communication.
And so maybe this could be a manifestation of that, where there is this decline in connection between the patient and the doctor, and it's ending in dehumanization and violence.
I won't say that violence doesn't happen in other specialties, but this particular video is talking about emergency medicine. I don't know how much connection you can build under those circumstances, but I can see how your manner as a provider might get in the way of whatever you can build. But that's blaming that's blaming in one of the victims of this situation. So I don't want to go too far with that.
I actually can connect those. Okay. So if you look at primary care utilization, which is the place where you're most likely to have a long-term connection with your medical care team, that has been relatively declining, and the utilization of emergency care has been increasing. And with increased stress on the emergency medicine system, whether that be from private equity taking over emergency medicine practices and pushing them to see more and more patients and connect with them less and less, I guess that's, and it's also we're feeding into my connection.
Yeah, it's also just inherently difficult to be in the ER to wait your turn, especially when you're in pain.
Yeah, I mean, go look at the reviews for your local emergency room. I mean, if that doesn't epitomize where people are at with the relationship with their emergency care physicians, like what does?
Yeah.
I would assume that you feel, depending on what's going on in your emergency room at any given moment, you're either frustrated that it took so long for you to get seen, you're frustrated that your physician, that your emergency room physician has a certain view of you and what got you into that emergency room in the first place. You're frustrated with the circumstances of your life.
You're vulnerable, defensive.
That brought you to the emergency room in the first place.
You've been struggling to get into this emergency room for the last 7 hours, and you're getting frustrated, and you're feeling like you have to advocate for your care to the point of,
or even
physical,
even less
physical
thoughtful
advocacy.
Yeah, I feel like that implies a level of thoughtfulness that may not be the case for that patient. Like, I'm here to advocate for myself. And I'm like, I broke my arm and I'm pissed off and I'm going to it up.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a tough specialty though. It sounds really hard, combined with not being able to sleep and switching around your schedule a ton. And
I don't know how. I know emergency room physicians who love their work.
Yeah. Well, it's shift work, right? You don't bring a pager home. That's awesome.
That's awesome. But I don't know
36
how
hours a week is full time.
I just don't know how you switch gears so often and remain
sane.
Yeah.
That'd be tough.
I think you have the right to feel safe at your workplace.
Mm-hmm.
I guess in like, except for like extreme circumstances. I don't know if you're like a
soldier or something.
Yeah, or like if you like, I don't know why this came to my head, but like if you like organize like those like bungee jumping things, or like if you're a skydiver, like okay, I get it, but in the majority of workplaces,
I don't feel safe. The Red Bull guy who jumped from space, like I have the right to feel danger.
if you're not that guy, you should be able to feel safe in your workplace. So, like, I don't want to. There has to be some element that's missing that's not making these EDs safe. But then again, like,
they need security.
Yeah, but even then, like, if I walk into the ED and as a patient and there's like a ton of police around me, I'm not gonna feel safe either. So, like, there's gonna be an emotional
you're gonna
charge
think, why
there.
are there police around me? Why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're,
am I a dangerous person?
And if
it's like putting the armed militia in Hy-Vee. It's like, okay,
or like SWAT officers in schools.
You're trying to buy your
Hang on, what is this armed militia and Hy-Vee business?
That's happened before.
Last year they started putting armed cops in Hy-Vee.
Wait, what? I was just joking.
No, that's real.
Why?
That's real.
I haven't noticed.
Why? Loss prevention.
Loss
No,
what?
seriously. Like, go to Hy-Vee. Like there is somebody with like a bulletproof vest.
That's
who's
insane.
armed, and they're basically dressed up like a cop, but they have a Hy-Vee badge on.
What?
No, I'm serious.
I'm gonna have to open my eyes a little.
Yeah,
more when I
pay
go to the
attention.
Hy-Vee.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
that is crazy. So,
And I don't know. Do you think it makes Hy-Vee safer?
No,
Do you think it makes our ED safer?
I mean, especially if you're someone who's.
I think there's you can. I guess there's a way to respond to the violence. Then I think.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I can't
It doesn't
think of a
prevent
way that would.
I don't know if it prevents.
Is it a deterrent? I feel like it would be if somebody was getting pissed and there's a big security guard. Like, even if they wouldn't have guns or anything, like, I don't know, some sort of security would be nice for some of these workers. Like, that's not one of the inherent risk part of the jobs that you think about when you take the job, is getting beat up by one of your patients, right? You think
shouldn't
about
have
maybe
to.
getting a transmissible disease via blood infection or something like that.
Yeah,
that's much more realistic.
There are
risk.
realistic things, and then there are things you're like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I watched that video and I got a little depressed, and I was like, I'm going to share it with friends.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Dave. You're like lead up to that. I thought you were gonna make a joke, and then you played that video, and I was like, oh man, I hope that camera didn't see me laughing right before this.
If you noticed Alex laughing, it wasn't because he's a bastard.
Yeah, I totally didn't know he was gonna play that video. So full disclosure.
Yeah,
he doesn't like EM docs.
Can't believe there's security guards in Hy-Vee. That's insane.
Well, that's our show. Alex, Hend, Eric, thanks for being on the show with me today.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks.
Love you.
And what kind of selfish, pessimistic, irresponsible, and rudderless person would I be if I didn't thank you, Shortcoats, for making us a part of your week? If you're new here and you like what you heard today, follow the show wherever fine podcasts are available, like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. I don't know if I can say Google Podcasts anymore because I think they're phasing out Google Podcasts and moving things into Google Music or something like that. Anyway, today's episode was produced by yours truly. The show is made possible by a generous donation by Carver College of Medicine Student Government and ongoing support from the Writing and Humanities program. Our music is by Dr. Vox and Catmosphere. I'm Dave Etler saying, don't let the bastards get you down. Talk to you in 1 week. Hi, Shortcoats. Look, life in medical education, life in America, life in the world is often difficult. And I often wish I could help. All I have is this podcast, but in my wildest dreams, you have the support you need to lead a life of your choosing. You deserve to be happy, healthy, and successful in whatever ways you define those words. So if you need support because you've experienced racism, discrimination, harassment, mental health crises, I want you to be able to get the help that you need. And so I'm going to put some links in the show notes to some resources that you can use. But the bottom line is that for what it's worth, I see you. I know you're out there. I wish I could do more. Maybe I can in ways that I don't understand yet or know about. But I see you, and I'm glad you're here, and other people are too. The Short Coat Podcast is a proud member of the MedEd Media Network. Inspiration, information, and guidance on your journey to medical school and beyond at mededmedia.com.